So I kid you not, this is a true story. I was with a customer at 8 o'clock this morning, and she said, Bill, there's two types of customers. There's people, and there's analytics people. My suspicion in this room, given the audience, that we are analytics people, right? Grant and I, we're definitely analytics people. But what I want to talk about is how do we service people, the business users? And what we want to talk about is how do you actually deliver insights to the business users to drive better business outcomes. And before we jump into the presentation, I want you to do one quick thought experiment with me. Imagine you have 100, now that's actually made easier, 1,000 loan supervisors, right? And they're doing 10 loans a day for $100 for simple math. If you could deliver one insight that allows them to do at least one loan for $110 versus 100, and you've got 1,000 of those for 250 business days a year, that's an additional $2.5 million of revenue at the end of the year. It's the power of big numbers. If we can get insights into the hands of the business users, that's where the real change happens. So today what we're going to talk about is best practices of how to leverage technologies like machine learning and big data to really drive this type of outcome. And so if you look at the modern enterprise, they're just absolutely inundated with data, whether it's financial data, whether it's ERP data, CRM data, IoT data, big data, social data. I mean, it's coming in droves. And at the same time, we've got IT groups and developers looking at a bunch of analytics solutions for the past 20, 25 years. We're looking at big data solutions more recently. We're looking at cognitive computing solutions. I mean, heck, my mom's a third grade teacher. She's talking about cognitive computing. It is in the mainstream now, right? But the question we need to be asking ourselves is, with all of this data and all this technology, how are we as technologists answering the business questions? Are we actually solving those business goals? And we need to ask ourselves, is the data from the business processes combined with the technologies addressing the business goal? The big surprise is probably not. There's way too many examples where all those insights are kept in the cubicles of the data scientist and the analyst and maybe delivered as a briefing book to the C-suite, but it's not making its hands into the business user. And the question is are you going to disrupt or be the disruptor? I mean, this slide should be very relevant to the audience in this group. Kabbage has put the big dominant financial services players on their heels. They're taking their business away by doing loans in, 30 minutes? And Forrester's recently released this survey where companies that truly are insights-driven will take $1.2 trillion of business away from their competitors. That's an enormous sum. And we want to make sure that each of you have your fair share of that $1.2 trillion. So what does it take to complete this journey? We're going to talk about this at the very end, but it's location, location, location. You have to deliver those insights as part of the business process, part of the business application, part of the business workflow. If it's delivered as a separate dashboard, it's likely not going to be used. One of my stupid geek jokes, if the dashboard's rendered into Force, does anyone care? No. You have to deliver it at the point of work. So GoodData is really focused on delivering insights into tangible, real business action. Can we actually take an insight and automate an action? If we can't completely automate it, can we make a strong recommendation? And failing a recommendation, we need to, at the very least, deliver the insight at the point of work so that the business user can make that better business decision. Our value proposition is that GoodData delivers that end-to-end solution. And as Grant switches over to the demonstration, we want to demonstrate some best practices of how to deliver these insights. And so we're going to do a little bit of role-playing. Grant is going to be playing the role of Claire. We didn't think this through very carefully, but and what we're going to demonstrate is actually a company where FinFin is wanting to provide credit to those unbanked customers. In the past, this would take a staff of hundreds of actuaries and loan officers in weeks of time. And we're going to demonstrate how machine learning, data enrichment, and delivering insights at the point of work can really help drive this process into competitive advantage so that they can disrupt their market. Grant?
Thanks. So I'll preface this by saying this is actually based on a real customer engagement. Of course, we can't show you the production version of it, but I think the concept should be clear to all of you. So today I'm playing the role of Claire, and as Bill mentioned, I'm a loan supervisor. And what I'm doing is I'm actually going to review in demos, Wi-Fi.
we should have gone with hardwired.
Yes, we should have gone with hardwire. I'm actually going to review the status of the algorithm which is approving and rejecting loans on behalf of these underbanked and unbanked applicants that we now serve. And as you can see on the right-hand side, this is my sort of point of work, and the chief actuary has asked me to go through and do a sort of quick check of the outputs from the algorithm to see if I'm sort of happy. And one of the key questions I've always had as a loan supervisor is, I don't quite trust machines to make decisions for me, so how can I be confident that the decision they make is actually the appropriate one? And what I'm going to walk you through is how I make that determination so that this process took previously hundreds and hundreds of underwriters, loan officers, and so on, is now entirely a system driven by my directives. So what I can do is, if I take a step back, for this week, there have been 223 loans approved and 108 loans denied. What I've done is uncovered a list of the loans that were actually approved, and I'm able to drill in to see why the system made the determination that it did. And Wi-Fi permitting, this will load. And so here you can see the system has approved this loan application because it assesses that Lee, in this case, has a very high likelihood of repayment. You can see some of the key credit factors that we consider in this. I'll admit to you this is actually quite a simplistic view of the features used by the underwriting model, but it gives you a sense of some of the alternative features we are using to better predict the actual likelihood of repayment. And if I go back, I can do the same workflow for my denied loan applications. So again, you can see a list of who's been denied. And of course, we're never going to get to 100% approval rate, no matter how smart the algorithm behind this. We don't ever want to get to that point. But let's at least understand why an applicant is being denied. And as you can see here, a couple different factors. One, the system is assessing a pretty low likelihood that Mikhail, in this case, will actually repay. That's due to a number of reasons, some of which is incomplete disclosure by the applicant. But you can also see that, again, some sort of late payments or non-payments on a number of different bills, utilities, phone, that kind of thing, have also been included in this recommendation to deny. So we're getting this sense of explainability about why this black box is not a black box, but actually helping to automate those routine decisions that I need to, that previously were highly manual and subject to bias and noise. And so my QA is complete, and I can integrate with my productivity system and send these over to my chief actuary to say, hey, system's working great. I can go and focus on another project.
So, granted, I know that this is definitely a very simplistic example, but the purpose is to demonstrate how we can actually use machine learning along with data enrichment to really drive and automate a business process. Because if we really take a step back and think about previously, the before scenario, this would take weeks to process with hundreds of people. And our goal through the automation with augmented insights is to drive disruptive pace of business, right? And so that's really the power of delivering those insights as part of the business workflow. And we really feel that it's a fundamental best practice to do so. And the one thing before we switch is that Grant really highlighted the importance of showing the transparency. A lot of our customers, they'll start off with the recommendation. Even if it's such a high prediction score, they'll start off with the recommendation because they're not quite ready to automate yet. They want to get that trust. And by providing the transparency behind the algorithm, they develop that trust to the point where it's like, okay, you get a score of 95% or above, just automate it, don't even want to see it. But what we want to do now is to switch context. Say thank you to Claire. We're going to wish her well. And now we're going to say hello to John. John is a fleet manager. And what we want to talk about is how can you take advantage of IoT in the financial services market? And so we're going to completely shift gears. FinFin is a huge financial services conglomerate, and they have a commercial insurance business. And they actually provide management products to fleet managers to help them manage their costs, their risk, and capital expenditures with respect to their fleet. So, Grant? Sure.
So, again, same technology under the hood, but a completely different use case, right? So, I'm a fleet manager, and my business, my commercial auto insurance provider is ThinFin. I don't particularly care about that. What I particularly care about is three things as a fleet manager. I care about what are my day-to-day running costs, operational costs. 2, how do I manage risk? And 3rd, how do I manage longer-term capital expenditure? And this is based upon another real-life example using telematics data primarily, a number of other sort of third-party data sources, where I, for the first time, am going to be able to get answers to all those questions with a degree of precision and speed that was never before possible. So, in answer to the first part of that question, how do I manage my day-to-day operational costs? Well, great thing about telematics is that I, for the first time, have incredible insight into exactly how much these vehicles are being driven. So I can do things like calculate fuel economy and also understand the wear and tear in those vehicles. So I can start to understand at what point I should be doing predictive maintenance rather than waiting for something to break down and then react to it. So you can start to see that, fuel consumption, fleet maintenance, these are some of the things that I'm finally able to monitor. Now let's talk about managing risk. So as a fleet manager, my key source of risk is my drivers. And the key questions I have about that are, who are my best drivers? An example I gave previously, who's not putting wear and tear on those vehicles, who's driving well, but by contrast, who also are the people that I should be concerned about because they speed or do risky things like drive at night. So again, I now have, thanks to telematics and predictive analytics, insight into who are likely to cause those accidents. And if we had more time, I could actually drill into a personalized scorecard for each of those drivers that would allow me to have a conversation with them about how to improve and reduce their risk. But let's talk about the third piece that I got to. And here I'm going to show a bit more of a decision flow, which is how do I manage longer-term capital expenditure, right? At what point does the cost of keeping a particular vehicle on the road exceed the cost of selling it and replacing it with a newer model, right? And so one of the things that I'm going to show you here is, hey, I'm, in this case, responsible for Switzerland. And here's a map of the percentage of cars that are approaching or have exceeded the point at which it is cost prohibitive to keep them on the road. So I have a sort of intuitive workflow where I can click into burn, for example. And the system is going to flag, Wi-Fi permitting, the two vehicles that are actually, the system has predicted are ready for retirement. So I can actually follow through on this action. And I'm going to get three things. One is a basic vehicle profile, so pulling from, let's see if that image will load. It's going to, the great unveiling of a Volkswagen Golf. I feel like I'm in an auto show. So I'm actually going to be able to sort of pull in all that third-party data about those vehicles, things like fuel economy and so on and so forth, the Kelley Blue Book value and that kind of thing. Secondly, I'm going to get a calculation of, on the left-hand side, what would be the expected revenue gained if I actually replace this with a newer model. And on the right-hand side, what would happen if I continue to maintain and operate the current vehicle? As you can see, it's sort of twice as cost-effective to actually exchange this vehicle for a newer model because it's less likely to break down and so on and so forth. And so I get a recommendation, and that's the third part of this. Why don't you go ahead and retire this vehicle? So again, this gives you a sense of sort of how we're trying to automate those workflows, take that cognitive load off people like John, myself, a fleet manager, who isn't probably the best with a calculator, let alone an Excel spreadsheet, and start to make their jobs a lot easier and more productive.
And while Grant's switching back over to the presentation for me, again, we know that this is a very simplistic example, but it's illustrative of the benefits of really using those insights, the analytics, to drive a very specific action. We cannot encourage you enough, as you're using your big data and you're using all those technologies, deliver it as an action. Deliver it as part of the workflow so that you really get the best bang from it. And we've got 33 seconds left, and here's the fastest pitch ever. GoodData provides an end-to-end solution that pre-integrates data ingestion, analytics, warehouse, visualization, integration, all so that you can focus on the value that you bring. Focus on the machine learning algorithms. Focus on the analytics. Focus on the value-add components. Let us provide that end-to-end solution as a single subscription with a single SLA delivered at cloud scale. And as you think about the solution, think about delivering it as a product, right? You build your go-to-market team. And then I'm going to hit the highlights on this one. Build a set of use cases for targeted personas, understand what their business problems are. Don't just deliver analytics. Don't just deliver a dashboard because it looks pretty. Really think about the specific business problems that you're trying to solve. And then just like in real estate, location, 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 embed, embed, embed at the point of work. All right. I think we got 5 minutes for questions. For those NPR fans, this is Stump the Chump time. So the first question, speaking of stumping the chump, is if the algorithm gets it wrong, who's liable to pick up the bill, you or your customer? That's an excellent question. Depends on how good our legal team is. I will start, and I'll let Grant answer. I mean, whenever we develop this is in partnership with our customers. We rarely are just going to go sit and design an algorithm by ourselves. It's done in great partnership with the customers, and that training experience, and before you turn on the full automation, is a lot of transparency in the actual recommendation, so that by the time you go to production, you do have that confidence. And because our system can actually record the action, not just recommend the action, we're able to feed that back. So we have this closed system of insight for continuous improvement.
So I'll add sort of 2 nuances to that. So one, we're trying to improve upon an existing human process, and so there are already sort of pre-existing rules and so on that are effectively being replicated in the software, or in the algorithm, I should say. The second thing is actually the key legal question right now isn't so much this, well, that's certainly important. It's who actually owns the IP. This is sort of a hot potato about sort of once you develop that algorithm, is it the person, is it us, is it you, is it co-owned, and those things. So there are a lot of really interesting legal questions about this, but I think that's sort of a result of just sort of how compelling these ideas are and why it sort of makes sense to have these conversations.
Yep. So the next question is, are you a decision engine able to ingest data in real time, or are you building dashboards that are based on data previously loaded via some batch process? I'm going to take the easy way out and say sort of both. So if we kind of parse the sentence a little bit, so real time is defined. Can you deliver data in a set period of time? Now, if you're asking, do we do real time where you perform a transaction and 3 seconds later it's in our dashboard? No. We do have an ETL process. We do have a data pipeline. The fastest frequency we tend to support is around 15 minutes. So we're very near real time, but we're not an operational reporting system. In terms of preloaded data, many of our customers come with historical data that we can load into our cloud warehouse. But as they're also performing transactions, we constantly build at the same time. So.
I would say that there was a second part of that question, which is, can you make a call against our model and return that in real time? And the answer to that part is yes. So that is sort of a separate microservice within our platform. So in the examples given, should a loan application be approved or denied, we can do that in much better than 15 minutes, down to sort of sub-seconds.
Yeah. And then how did you generate the rules for the loan approval process? I'm inclined to just throw him over the cliff on this one, but yeah, I mean, we are not a financial services company. We are a platform, and so we've done a lot of research and discussions with our customers, about the unbanked credit problem, and so based on what we've read in interactions with customers, we've stubbed out a sample algorithm that was really the basis for the demonstration today. I'd love to tell you it was something far more fancy than that, but. And then it looks like we got one more question. Besides loan approval, what are other use cases? You want to tell them about the service channel?
Sure. So, I mean, I think as a company, I can sort of give you a couple off the top of my head, but I think we're really the tip of the iceberg. Part of the point of a demo was to try to sort of open your eyes to the question of, if you have 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 frontline employees, if you look at the sort of discrete decisions, mundane decisions they're making day in, day out, that probably gives you a pretty long list of use cases that you can generate internally. So really, the bottleneck there is more sort of imagination about sort of what could be better. What Bill was referring to is, to take one example, one of our customers provides a facility management software solution for the likes of Walmart, Apple, 100,000 locations around the globe. And a key constituent of that service is facility managers, whose job is primarily just to make decisions about, should I approve or reject this invoice? Should I schedule this maintenance or wait for something to break, et cetera? And so we have, we're taking on sort of use case by use case each of those sets of decisions, and we're seeing broad applicability for those kinds of questions across a variety of different industries. Second type of use case, and that's more around sort of taking the data that you as an enterprise already own. And the distinction I would make is that we're also working on a separate set of use cases, which is really how the data that I own that's in my data lake is only a partial picture of what I need to know to go out there and create business value. You sort of saw some hints of that within the demonstration here about how you integrate additional third-party sources. But another great example would be, for example, prospecting. How can we actually combine what you know about your customer base with finding like customers in the marketplace? How can we build an alternative profile using things like social media and other proprietary or non-proprietary data sources and develop that kind of thing? So that kind of prospecting use cases and so on. I could go on and on, but please come find me at the booth.
If I can add one point, because I see I'm about to get the hook right here. It's from the product management perspective, when we're defining product strategy, we're looking for decisions that have high cognitive load, where there's many variables to make a complex business decision, and one that typically has multiple data sources to help make the decision. So that's kind of our umbrella set of use cases. Anyhow, thank you very much for your time, and have a great afternoon.